Okay, this year is dedicated for Aryeh Mendel and Chai Sarah should have a full Shlemo Kreva.
Where are we?
We are in the mamer Ani ledodi li tafshin chof, which is imprinted in Melukat Dalid. We're in the middle of the mamer page Shin Samach Vav, in the third paragraph in Ois Vav. Page Shin Samach Vav, the third paragraph in Ois Vav that starts with the Shloimah. Yeah. Danke.
I don't see it.
You don't see it? Next, the other side. No. Here it is. Here's here. Okay, everybody has it? Okay. So we learned the mashal of the Alter Rebbe regarding the king coming to the field, and we got ourselves into a royal mess, pun intended. The Alter Rebbe tells us that the time of Elul is the Aveda of a Yid to the Eibishter. The Yid, on his own power and of his own will, wants to be close to the Eibishter, and in the month of Elul, does everything he can to fix, to repair his relationship with the Eibishter. However, there's also a revelation of the Gimel Midas Harachmim, of the 13 attributes of mercy. There's also a revelation of those in the month of Elul. And these help the Yid to do his service to the Eibishter, to return, to reconnect to the Eibishter. And this poses a problem. If we say that Ani ledodi, I am to my beloved, the Yid is the one who is doing the work of reconnecting to the Eibishter, and that's what Elul is all about, then what kind of a place, what kind of a role do the Yid Gimel Midas Harachmim play? And if we say that there's a revelation of the Yid Gimel Midas Harachmim, then why do we call Elul Ani ledodi, I am the one who's doing the work? In order to explain this, the Alter Rebbe gave us the mashal of a melech besada, of a king who finds himself in the field. That usually the king is in his palace, and all of his millions of subjects, all of the people of the kingdom, are not permitted to go and see the king in his palace. And in the month of Elul, the king leaves the palace and he travels into the field where he's close to his subjects. And over there, everybody and anybody is permitted. The Fidik Rebbe adds, has the ability, has the power to go and see him. And this was the explanation that the Alter Rebbe is giving, that the person has to go out and greet the king in the field. However, the king doesn't go to the person himself. He just makes himself available by leaving the palace and being in the field. But the Rebbe asked a series of questions about this, because the Alter Rebbe continues saying that the king receives everybody with a shining face, with a happy face, a pleasant face. And then the Alter Rebbe continues and says, and he shows them a smiling face. So the Rebbe asks, what's the Alter Rebbe telling us over here? Right? The Alter Rebbe isn't a storyteller. Look at the Torah isn't a storybook. It's Torah. And Torah reveals the essential truth of the connection of a Yid to the Eibishter and the work of a Yid to the Eibishter in this world. So what's the Alter Rebbe telling us with these details? He's making it sounds, Chas v'Sholom, one could think that the Alter Rebbe is making a nicer story. It should be more geschmack when you say the story by your Shabbos table. But the thing is, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit with the narrative of the story. If the king is showing his shining face to the people, and the king is smiling to the people, so then he is awakening the people to come closer to him. So he's drawing them nearer. So it's the work of the king. And the Rebbe went into detail to explain to us how this reveals different levels of the connection between a Yid and the Eibishter. So the Eibishter is revealing for the Yid his connection to him. And then the Rebbe asks that really, if you think about it, the mashal itself seems to be inappropriate for what the Alter Rebbe is trying to describe. This saying that the king goes out into the field, that within itself causes a Yid to want to go and see the king. Look, the king left his glorious palace, he removed his crown, he removed his robes. Why did he do all of this? Just so he could come and see me, like it says in the Ha'ara, just so he could come and see me. And this awakens within the Yid the desire and with a tremendous force to go and see the king. So the whole mashal doesn't make sense. Why did Alter Rebbe bring this mashal? A ganze drama, a ganze story. If we properly understood what the Alter Rebbe is saying, he should have used a much simpler mashal. He should have said that the gate is closed with a lock and a guard at the gate of wherever it is that you want to go. It doesn't have to be a palace, it doesn't have to be a king. The gate is closed, it's locked. And in Elul, the guard is asked to step aside and the lock is removed. And if you want, you can enter. What's this ganze Maisa with the king? You say a king, it gets very dramatic. Dramatic in the sense that the person becomes drawn to the king. What's the Alter Rebbe saying over here? And in order to explain this, the Rebbe tells us that really, that for 150 years we've been misunderstanding, until the Rebbe said this mamer from the time that the Alter Rebbe said this mamer, we've been misunderstanding the whole story. We were looking at the story upside down. Or if you want, you could say we were looking at the story outside in. What do we mean to say? In Chassidus, Chassidus discusses two different types of relationships. One relationship is between a Rav and a Talmud, between a teacher or a mentor and his student. And the other relationship is the relationship between a king and his subject, a king and a member of his nation. If we try to envision the scenario, the story of a mentor and his student, so we could think like this. Imagine that there's a very great wise person who is a very refined person and a very fine person. And he has a group of students. And he taught them from a very young age, and he raised them to be refined, edel, to be upstanding people, moral, ethical, to care about humanity, to care about their fellow beings, to care about spiritual issues, matters of the spirit, matters of the soul, not only matters of the body, similar to a behemoth. He taught them, he elevated them, and he did a tremendous job with all of these students. Then what happened? One of the students fell off the way. He lost his bearings. And for one reason or another, he strayed slowly but surely until eventually he strayed very far from the type of person that his mentor raised him to be. He became a drug addict and a drug dealer and a criminal, and all he was interested in was just fulfilling his own pleasures. He couldn't care less, not about his fellow being, not about humanity in general, not about advancing civilization, not about what the world looks like, not about what's right, not about the fact that he has a soul. He couldn't care less about any of this. And he left very, very far. And then the master, the Rav, the teacher, the mentor, goes out and remembers one day that, I had 10 students and 9 of them turned out tremendously okay, but one of them strayed very far. And he goes out and he travels a long distance looking for his student, and he finally finds his student. And when the student sees him, something inside him is touched, something inside him is awakened. He says, wow, this great person. The student doesn't care anymore about anything. He within himself is only interested in what gratifies him and what gives him satisfaction and physical pleasure. But he still knows that the truth is with the teacher. It's just that his life is nothing like that. And he sees the teacher, and this great man, this tremendous person, remembered him after all of these years and came out such a long way to seek him out and to come to the other side of the tracks, to the not good part of town, and to bring him back, to show him closeness. So this awakens within the student a great desire, a great feeling of tshuva that he wants to go back now and reconnect with the ways that his teacher has taught him. This is the way we understood the story of Melech Besada. However, it's a very big mistake. It's not at all the story. What's wrong with the story? What's wrong with this understanding is that what we're saying is that there's the teacher or the king, the way we're thinking about it, and there's the student or the subject of the king, the person. And they're two separate things. They're two separate things. And the person is interested in what he's interested in. And the king is on a higher level, is somewhere distant and far and greater than the person or the teacher. And we now have to retrain the person. We have to teach him something new, something that's not him. Show him something and get him to change his ways to become a different person. That he shouldn't be himself. He should elevate himself to something greater, to something better. And then we get into a whole bunch of problems. If you look at it that way, you get into a whole bunch of problems. Is it the king or is it the person? And even though superficially, and even with a certain amount of depth, it made sense to us what the Alter Rebbe said, that the king just went out into the field, the Gimel Midas Arachim are just there. But the person has to connect to that, and the person now has to take the opportunity and connect. However, in the end of the day, there's a king involved in the story over here. And the king negates the person. It's no longer the person, it's the king now. However, if we understand the story different, it's not like this. Who are we dealing with? We're dealing with a yid. We're talking about a yid. A yid's connection to the Eibishter, and a yid's desire, a yid's deep insistence on connecting to the Eibishter is not something that's separate from him. It's not circumstantial. It's not something that was taught to him. It's not something that somebody from the outside came and showed him. You want to know what we do in France? Here's what we do in France. This is what a yid does, Rahman al-Islam. That it's the same type of idea. It's not. We're talking about a yid. A yid, his essence is connected to the Eibishter. Like you're saying, he's connected to the Eibishter with the essence of his being. This is who he is. And that's why he wants to connect to the king. Not because he was taught something, not because you found some child on the street and raised him in a certain way, in a certain community, with a certain tradition, and now he's behaving like a yid. That's not the story at all. That's upside down. What you're saying is that we have somebody who's not a yid, chas v'sholom. And the reason why he's behaving like a yid is because of circumstance, because of where he was born, because of the lottery of where he was born, because of the community that he grew up with, because of the tradition of 3,500 years that goes back to Sinai. That's why he's a yid. Because he comes from Avraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov. That's why that doesn't touch the point yet. No, he's a yid because the essence of his soul is a yid. His truest inner being, his truest self, his core, is that he's a yid. And that's why he's connected to Torah. And that's why he was born a yid. And that's why he lives in a certain community and has a certain way of life. If you look at the story like that, now it's a whole other story. Suddenly we don't have any more problems. Whatever the king does to touch this point of truth that's in the yid's soul, the king didn't create it. The king didn't make him want to see the king. He nothing more than reminded him of what his true self is. His true self always wanted to connect to the king. He just needed a reminder. And now suddenly everything fits beautifully. The king Taka goes out to the field, and this within itself makes the yid excited. He hears, wow, the king left, he's coming to me, he's coming close to see me in my own place, in my own condition, where I am with all of my filth. He came to see me. And not only that, he's showing me a nice face, a pleasant face. And not only that, he's smiling to me. So the king is doing a whole lot. But what's the king doing a whole lot to do what? To create something by the person that the person doesn't have? To bring the king's existence to the person? No. He's just reminding the yid of what he truly is. And if that's the case, then whose Aveda is it? It's the yid's Aveda. It's the yid all along. It's him. It just had to be uncovered. The dirt from the top had to be cleaned off. He needed a reminder. And that's what the story of Elul is. The story of Elul is not chas v'sholom a yid thinking to himself how low he is, how distant he is. And now he has to come and change himself, change who he is and what he is. And maybe if he's lucky, he'll succeed somewhat in getting closer to the king. It's a whole other story. All that has to happen is I just have to remind myself of my true self. I'm already there. I'm already one with the king. I'm already close to the king. I just forgot about it. So the story of Elul is not one of somebody putting himself down. That's not the Avodah of Elul. That's not what's happening. It's the opposite. The Avodah of Elul is elevating myself to my true self, reminding myself that I am truly a yid who's connected to the Eibishter with the essence of my being. This is the whole me. This is the true me. And it was never different. I just forgot about it, maybe, Rahman al-Islam. So now I'm remembering, and I'm there already. That's how the Rebbe explains to us, is the true depth of the Alter Rebbe's mashal. Like it says in the mamer of Moskva and in other places, a mashal from the Mishnah, from Mishnais. The Mishnais, in Mishnais, everything is written very short. And then you have the Gemara that goes and takes apart the words of the Mishnah over many bletter, over many dapim, and finally comes to understand what this one line in the Mishnah came to say. Because the way if you want to convey a very deep message, you can't just say it straight out. If you say it straight out and the person isn't able to pick up on it, it will be lost on him. It will lead him down a crooked path. He won't get the point. You have to teach b'derech ktsara in a short few words. And the Alter Rebbe put all of this depth into his mashal, but it took until our Rebbe to come and show us the true depth of what the Alter Rebbe is saying, that it's actually the story of Elul is not that the king is coming to make a person something new, to change a person, to take a dirty person and turn him into a clean person. It's actually just to remind a Yid of his true essence, of his true self. And if this is the case, then we have to rebuild the whole story. We have to reconstruct the whole mashal, and that's what the Rebbe does. So let's see now inside the Rebbe say that. The third paragraph in Eisvav, the Rebbe explains what the Alter Rebbe means to say, what is going on over here as follows. The desire of the nation to go and greet their king stems from the essence of their being. It doesn't come from somewhere outside. It doesn't come from circumstance. It doesn't come because somebody convinced them. It comes because that is what they are. Since the king is the heart of the entire nation, therefore their connection and attachment to the king is with their entire existence. Unlike a teacher who teaches a student, this is explained that in the Hara, you see, it's trying to look at the Sikhs. Unlike a teacher who teaches his student, so what's the obligation of the student? To what degree is the student connected to the teacher? He's connected to him relating to the wisdom that the teacher is teaching him. The divrei chachma, the Torah, the wisdom that the teacher is teaching the student, that's what defines the connection between the student and the teacher. And therefore, the student could have his own independent life. He could be his own independent person. The only requirement for him to be considered a student of this teacher is that his wisdom, his chachma, his Torah should be in line and should follow the teachings of his teacher. However, when you're talking about the king and his people and his servants, it's a whole other story. What do we see in halacha? If a king tells somebody something, if a king tells somebody, stay in your house, and the person leaves the house, what's the din of this person? The person is chayiv misah. Why is he chayiv misah? Let's look at Torah and mitzvahs. In Torah and mitzvahs, we have many mitzvahs. Some of them, a person gets malchus for. Some of them, it's worse things, mitzvah b'dei shamayim, karas chas v'shalom. Some of them he has to bring a carbon for. And then some of them, it's Bezdin has to kill him, right? It's chayiv misah. What's the explanation? Because some mitzvahs touch the essence of Yid. If a Yid serves Avodah Zarah, so he disconnected himself entirely from the source of his life. Since he disconnected himself by serving Avodah Zarah from the source of his life, so now, therefore, he has to die. Masha'enkin, if he didn't wear tzitzis, if he wore a beged with 4 corners and there weren't tzitzis on it, that doesn't touch the essence of his life. The same thing with the king. With the king, everything is connected to the essence of his life. The entire person, all of his chayis comes from the king. His whole life comes from the king. Just like a person, his leiv, his heart, is what gives chayis to the person's entire body. And if any portion of the body, chas v'shalom, becomes disconnected from the heart, that limb dies because it lost its connection to its source of life. A king and his nation is the same type of arrangement. The king is the source of life of the entire nation. And therefore, if a person shows any disconnect from the king, even in the smallest thing, it says, for example, if a person is standing in the presence of the king and he makes a hand motion, he's chayav misah. He made a hand motion. He didn't speak disrespectfully. He motioned towards something. What's the big chet over here? But with the explanation that we gave before, you could understand it. Because a person's entire life comes from the king, and therefore he has to be completely bottled. He has to be completely subjugated to the king in order to receive life from him. If he's standing in front of the king and he's busy making hand motions, the slightest thing, a hand motion, right? He's showing that I have my own existence. If my whole existence was just the king, then standing in front of the king, I would stand motionless and thoughtless, empty, complete, just somebody who's receiving what the king is telling me. This that I'm showing an independent motion, I have my own agenda in the presence of the king, shows that I disconnected myself from the king. And that's why the person is chayav misa. Part of the nekuda is that a connection between a yid and the Eibishter is like the connection between a king and his nation. And this connection is at the level of the essence of a yid. And since it's at the level of the essence of a yid, then why does the yid want to see the king? Not because anybody taught him to, but because that is his essence. That's why he wants to see the king. If so, how is it that a yid strays from the Eibishter? If the essence of a yid, if my truth, if my core, my essence is the Eibishter, so how is it possible that he strays from the Eibishter? Nevertheless, when the king and the nation are very distant from each other. It's possible that their connection to the king, it's possible that their connection to the king, and as a result of that, also their will to see the king could be hidden, could be covered over. Through this, that the king comes to the place of the nation, he comes to the field where the nation finds themselves. So that reawakens, it reveals this desire that a yid has to connect to the Eibishter. In other words, just like we could forget things in the physical sense, right? Sometimes, we remember things, sometimes we forget them. Just because we forgot something doesn't change the truth of what's going on. We forgot it. It's still true. Whatever the situation is, whatever was forgotten is still true. I forgot it. So the same thing with a yid. When a yid finds himself in this world, it's possible that he should end up in situations where he strays from his connection to the king because of the great distance that there is in Elam Hazeh, in this world between the Eibishter. We don't see the Eibishter clearly, and we see Elam Hazeh clearly. So what does the Eibishter do? So the Eibishter comes close to us. In Chodesh Elul, the Eibishter comes close to us again. And now that the Eibishter is close to us, so automatically our own desire to see the king is back in play. Clear? We understood the difference, how the Rebbe turned the whole situation upside down? Before, what were we talking about? Before, we were talking about a person who needs to be taught something, a person who's separate from the king. And we have to teach him that there's this idea of a king, and maybe you want to become his subject. In other words, the person and the king forever remain two separate things. They're never one. And therefore, when the person strays far away, he truly strayed far away. He became something else. He became a sinner. What's the name of the person? The person is a sinner. Mashayin Kain, the way the Rebbe explains it, that's chas v'sholom to say that. A yid is one with the Eibishter. His true essence, his true definition is that he's a part of the Eibishter. And because of that, no matter what happens, he's never a sinner. He's always a part of the Eibishter. The only thing that can happen is he could disconnect from that. So you remind him and you reconnect him to that. Okay. And so too it is in the Nimshol, and what Alter Rebbe is explaining to us, so too in the story in Elul, when the Gimel Midas Harachmim become revealed, when the 13 attributes of mercy in the month of Elul become revealed, what happens now? The Yid's own true will, his own true desire, and his own essence becomes revealed. We'll read fast because we're going to finish the mamer today, as Hashem is Baruch. So I'll go a little fast. As we can also understand from the continuation of the Alter Rebbe's mamer, the Shem Keil, who reishes Kalayid Gimel Midas U'Mekenu Nuklaluson. The Alter Rebbe explains what's the idea of Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim. The first one of the 13 attributes of the Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim is Keil, the name of Keil. And this is also the general idea of all of the Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim. What is Shem Keil? Or in other words, what are the Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim, which are all exemplified by the first attribute of Shem Keil? Shem Keil hu ein sof baruch hu mamash. Shem Keil is the infinite light of the Eibishter itself. Like it says in the pasuk, Keil havaya vayar lanu, that the Shem Keil is associated with the idea of light. The oir hu k'maya etzem. And light is just like its essence. As it's explained in several places, the difference between light and shefa. How do you type shefa in English? I'm not sure. A flow. Good. Let it be a flow. The shefa was shamashpim. It's something matzmel. It's like ashpa.
Many years ago, you had shefa milk. Remember?
Yeah. So flow.
The flow. There's
A land that's golden flow. Oh,
flow.
so it was a play on golden flow. Okay. Okay. No, so wait a second. So if we say flow, does anybody understand anything now? I still don't understand. It's because
The flow, like a waterfall.
like a waterfall. I'm still a little bit at a loss. Of Al Kapanim, here's what he points out over here, and it's explained in many places, like he says himself. Shefa is a system where the thing that comes is constrained and limited and matched, made appropriate for the place that it's coming to. Oir just comes similar to the way the light is, as it is. In other words, if there's a teacher who wants to explain something to a student, so the teacher isn't going to explain it the way he understands it. If he explains it the way he understands it, the student won't be able to understand. To understand what a teacher and a student means. It means, for example, the Rebbe. If the Rebbe is going to try to explain something to us the way the Rebbe understands it, we're not going to understand the word that's going on. So the Rebbe has to go and look and find different ways to make the concept, simpler and simpler until we can understand it on our level. Electricity. If it comes straight from the power line,
Some equipment.
Did I ever use that example?
of electricity.
That originates, let's say, in Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
Then that's so much power over there that if whatever you attach to, it'll blow it up. So it has to transduce, be until we can use it by plugging it.
And then you could
צינורות.
Tzinorot. So you have the main pipeline, and then you have the one that goes down the block, a channel. So and we transformers. But we could go even a step further. Ule Yishlema. We could say that if I take the computer and I plug it into the wall, what do I get? I get a computer, right? I could press buttons, I could write letters, I could connect to people across the globe. And I take a drill and I plug it in. What do I get? Something that goes around and around and around in a circle. What happened over here? Because the difference is that the light, the shefa that comes through the electricity gets changed into different circuits or into different magnetic fields or whatever it is that's going on over there, and it behaves differently depending on where it's going to. So shefa flow changes. A shefa flow changes according to where it's coming to. Light doesn't change. The light shines, and the rays of light just come the way they came out of their source in the sun and the light, wherever they came from. So the idea of Yud Gimel Midas Rachmim is that they're like they're not like shefa. Everything in Seder Ishtalshlus Bepashtus is like shefa. It's not the pure light of the Ein Sof. It's the light of the Ein Sof, the way it was constricted, similar to the electricity coming from the power station in Niagara Falls, and slowly constricted and goes through transformers and it goes through circuitry or different arrangement of wires, and it gets turned into different things. It's not like that. It comes directly the way it is. That's Ishtalshlus. Yud Gimel Midas Rachmim is higher than Ishtalshlus. It comes directly the way it is. Okay, so that's the idea of the Yud Gimel Midas Rachmim, and it's expressed in the name Kale, which is the first of the Yud Gimel Midas Rachmim. What else do we have like this? Every single Yid also has within him this revelation of Kale, this revelation of the Ein Sof. The Yesodam is not only that the Yid has it within him, in other words, like another component amongst many components, no. The revelation of the Shem Kale within every single Yid is what governs him and is what controls him and is what his true self is. The Yisrael who is Yud Sar Kale. Because a Yid is called Yisrael, which is made up of the letter Yud, which shows that it's constant. It's always, a Yid is always Sar Kel. He's always governed by the Shem Kel. That's what's always his primary existence. The Ein Sof. And because of this, every single Yid's bittul. To the Eibishter is a bittul that goes way beyond reason, way above reason, like we see that Yidden are willing to give up their lives for the Eibishter, which is beyond reason. Because unlike everything else that exists within this world, in Atzilus B'ri Yitzira Asiyah, in a Yid you have a revelation of the Gilui of the Ein Sof Baruch Hu itself, without any restrictions, without any limitations, without any coverings. So we have two things. We have the Shem Kel is revealed in the Yid Gimel Midas Rachmim, and the Shem Kel is revealed amongst Yidden, within every single Yid. And through this, that we have a revelation in the month of Elul of the Yid Gimel Midas Rachmim, which is the general idea, the primary idea of Yid Gimel Midas Rachmim is the name Kel, is the Ein Sof, so the level of Kel is awakened within every single Yid. And that's the mechanism that we explained to us in the brackets, the mechanism of why is it that by revealing the Yid Gimel Midas Rachamim, suddenly a Yid is awakened to his own true self, because it's all a story of revealing the Ein Sof, the infinite light of the Eibishter that's higher than Ishtalshalos. And this all now explains to us why the Aveda of Elul is my Aveda, is the Yid's Aveda. Even though the Eibishter is the one who caused and brought me and awakened me to do this work of the month of Elul, nevertheless, it's still me. Because all of the revelations of the month of Elul that come from the Eibishter are merely a cause to bring about and to reveal what's the truth of the person himself, the pnimius, the inside of the person himself. And that answers our questions of, is it the king, is it the person? It's the person, it's always the person. The person just needed a reminder, he just needed a little cleaning. He just needed to be reawakened to his own truth. And now the Rebbe works his way backwards, reconstructing the rest of the mashal. So what kind of a role do Yid Gimel Midas Rachmim play, right? Until now, what did we think? What's the month of Elul? The month of Elul is a very holy time. It's a time of a great revelation of Yid Gimel Midas Rachmim. And we, people down here who are very low, benefit from the revelation of the Yid Gimel Midas Rachamim. In other words, we are small and low and distant, chas v'sholom from Elikus. The Yid Gimel Midas Rachamim, that's the Ein Sof, that's close to the Eibishter, and that's what happens in Elul, that a great revelation comes down to us, distant people from the Eibishter. No, that's not the story at all anymore. By this that the Yid Gimel Midas Rachmim awaken and reveal the inner desire, the inner will of every single Yid. And where does this will that the Yid Gimel Midas Rachmim reveal come from? Why Taka is the essential will of every single Yid, his core? Why is it Taka to be connected to the Eibishter? Because that's where he comes from. He comes from the Atzmos, not only from the Ein Sof. The Yid Gimel Midas Rachamim Taka come from the Ein Sof. They're Ein Sof in its purity, Ein Sof without the limitations of Seder Ishtalshalos. But it's the Ein Sof. It's not the Atzmos. A Yid wants to be connected to the Eibishter. Why? Because he comes from Atzmos. Now we can Taka say Chelik Lekam Imal Mamash, because he comes from Atzmos. So now Nasa Ilib Yid Gimel Midas Rachamim. Now the Yid Gimel Midas Rachamim are elevated because they came to the Yid. Because the Yid Gimel Midas Rachamim revealed themselves to the Yid. In other words, because of something from the Ein Sof revealed itself to a Yid down here in this physical world, now the Yid Gimel Midas Rachamim themselves are elevated because now they take on within themselves a quality of Atzmos, of the essence of the Eibishter, not only his infinite light, but his essence, which that is what a Yid has. How does this work? This that it says in Torah, we already have it in the first Rashi, that the entire creation was created for Yidden, Bereishis, Beis Reishis, B'Shvil Yisrael, for the Torah. Like it's explained in other places, that amongst the two, the primary one is Yisrael, is the Yidden. Hakavana b'zeh, the intention with this, that we say that the entire world was created for the Yidden, is not only the creation of worlds, in other words, worlds which are already existences, but even every single revelation, even revelations that are so close to the Eibishter that we can't call them a world, we could just call them a revelation. Even the highest Giluyim, every revelation that came from the Eibishter was only for the Yidden. If so, through this, that the 13 attributes of mercy descend from their lofty position in Heichal Malchusay, in the chamber of the king of the Eibishter, L'mayla mihishtalshalos, and they descend and come L'sada, to the field, in order to awaken and to reveal the inner will that's found within every single yid, Miskala Behem. So now we just revealed within the Yid Gimel Midas Harachamim, Shakavana Behem Bishvil Yisrael, Shashar Shemu Ba'atzmos. That why did the Yid Gimel Midas Harachamim exist in the first place? Why did the Eibishter bring about the revelation of the Yid Gimel Midas Harachamim? He did it for the Yidden. If he didn't do it for the Yidden, then why are the Yid Gimel Midas Harachamim coming here? If we understand it, if our superficial understanding is correct, that we are low and distant, we are of a low, we're part of Seder Hishtalshlus. We're already a likus after a likus was constricted and covered over and hidden and transformed. Tmuris and Chilufiasias and Echveis and Ishmas, everything. So we are very distant and low from the Eibishter. And the Yid Gimel Midas Rachman are close to the Eibishter. Then why are the Yid Gimel Midas Rachman bothering Bichlal to come down to us? Does it make any sense that something that's higher should care about and should be used to come lower? It's like somebody takes a golden piece of jewelry and uses it to turn a screw. Doesn't make any sense. It's not something that you do. So your Gimel Midas Harachmim are being used to come down lower? Doesn't make sense. But according to this, it makes perfect sense. Because actually a Yid is connected to the essence of the Eibishter. The Yid Gimel Midas Harachamim are connected to the Ein Sof, to the infinite light of the Eibishter, but not the essence. Why did the Eibishter create the Yid Gimel Midas Harachamim in the first place? In order to help us Yidden in this world who are connected to his essence. That's why he created them. And through this, but this is all hidden. You can't see it superficially. In the month of Elul, when the Yid Gimel Midas Harachamim actually descend down here into this world, so now we see, aha, now I know what the story is. Now I know why you're here. If you came down to this world, it must be that you came down because that's the purpose for which you were created in the first place. Because there is no other explanation why they would come down. So now we reveal that the Yid Gimel Midas Harachamim also are connected to Atzmos. How? Because they're connected to a Yid. Because they serve a Yid who's connected to Atzmos. So now we elevated the Yid Gimel Midas Harachamim and we gave them a connection to Atzmos itself. The whole story is upside down, like we said in the beginning. Or inside out.
I always understand it's a level where Averis falls, it's not recognized. It's so high up that it's a mechanism where Hashem doesn't see Averis or anything. It's Rachamim, which is higher than Din, higher than everything. Its purpose is that it's the only way a Yid can work his way back to Hashem is through Yid Gimel Midas Harachamim, because of the fact that it doesn't recognize Averis.
True. But that's bothering you in the context of this mamer, that way of looking at things?
No, but I'm saying we said before, Shefa is individuality. When it comes down to specific in a specific manner that directed to you.
Right.
That's the meaning of Shefa. And then we said Yid Gimel Midas Harachamim is an overall concept which doesn't look for particulars, but it comes down.
Okay.
So if that's the case, so the whole idea of Yid Gimel Midas Harachamim is there simply because it's telling you, it's teaching you that there's levels where Hashem doesn't look at Averis. So there's ways. That means there is a way back.
So I think the general idea that you're discussing is that it's the famous question. We'll touch on it very quickly. How could a Yid fix something that was broken? If it was broken, how could you fix it? A Yid didn't have Avera. That's it. The story is over. So let's explain that where do Averis exist in places that are lower than Yid Gimel Midas Harachamim. Yid Gimel Midas Harachamim is a higher place. It's called the Baal Haratzin, right? And therefore it can connect. And that's true. But I think that in this Maimar, the Rebbe is touching on a deeper point. That's one level, what you described. And that's explained in other places. But over there, the Yid Gimel Midas Harachamim remain as something that, what is its definition? It's higher than Hishtalshlus. It's higher than sin. What is the level? Something that's higher than sin, but not the essence of the Eibishter. Okay. Over here, the Rebbe is talking about an even deeper aspect, where we start talking about the essence, what's connected to the essence of the Eibishter. And that's a Yid over here. And we bring the Yid Gimel Midas Harachamim to even higher than the place where you were describing, that it's a place where tshuva is possible. we bring it even higher to be connected to the essence of the Eibishter. Sits well? Okay. Time is very short. We have to finish the mamer. So you'll forgive me. I'll go fast. There's one more nakuda. There's one more point that we'll spend a little time on. And the rest, page and a half, we will read relatively quickly. Yeah, because then the next one is not going to work out if we leave just a small. Yeah. Vish Lakasha is there, but connects this idea of Melech L'Sada Nevad, that even a king serves the field. What does that mean? Even a king who's of the highest level, Nevad L'Sada, must serve the field, because that's where the king finds his food. If the king doesn't tend to the field, if the king doesn't do what's needed to give the field, to fertilize it, to make sure it's planted, to appoint people to take care of the field, the king won't have what to eat and he'll die. So even the highest level has to serve this field. Well, the Zayah explains that the king is not only talking about a king in this world, it's also talking about the Melech Ilah, that even the highest level of Melech, in other words, the Yidgimel Midas Harachmim, have to connect to the field, the sustenance, the food of the Melech Ilah of the Yidgimel Midas Harachmim, it receives its sustenance by coming down and connecting and being drawn into the field. Because only by coming down into the field does the king, do we reveal in the king that the king's purpose was for the Yidden. And therefore now the king actually gets something from the Atzmos, it gets its sustenance from the place where it needs to get its sustenance from an even higher source than itself. And now here's a point that's important for us to think about. It says in the Zohar, there's two fields. There's Sada de Kedusha, Sada de Lu'umazeh. Just like there's the field of Kedusha, so too there's a field of Klippa, there's a field of Lu'umazeh. Yes, Shleimer, so we must say, the Inin Melech L'Sada Nevad, Shaladehe, Devam Shach L'Sada Nasa Ili B'Melech Ilahu, Be'ikar Aladehe Shah Giladi Gimel Mitzrach Shalom Alam Ishtalshus. We say that the king, the Yidgimel Midas Harachmim, are drawn into the field, and the Zohar explains that there's not only a field of Kedusha, there's also a field of Klippah. So we have to say that the main revelation of the Yidgimel Midas Harachmim, the main elevation of the Yidgimel Midas Harachmim to become connected to Atzmos is Dafke when the Yidgimel Midas Harachmim lower themselves to help those Yidden who are mamish and asada de Lu'umazeh, who are mamish stuck in klippos. Even those Yidden who said, I don't have place for the Eibishter in my life. I'll do whatever I have to do to quiet my guilt. But I don't have room for the Eibishter in my life. My life is interested in Rahman al-Islam, in things that are not the Eibishter. Even such a Yid, who's mamish a Perek Oil, and not only even such a Yid, especially such a Yid, when the Yidgimel Midas Harachmim come and reveal themselves to such a Yid, that's when the connection to Atzmos is truly brought out, is truly revealed. Why is that? So we'll say, because the Yidgimel Midas Harachmim now reveal the inner Ratzon of these Yidden, right? The Yidgimel Midas Harachmim reveals the Ratzon of the Yid who is a Perek Oil, of the Yid who's stuck in Klippos Mamish. It reveals his Ratzon. Okay, let's think about that. And they leave the desert, Sada de Lu'umazeh, L'Sada de Kedusha, L'Hakvelas Pnei HaMelech, and then they come and they return to the king. Why is this more than revealing the connection between a Yid who's not stuck in Klippos? Why? So the Rebbe is going to explain it here. By the Yidden who were at the ultimate extreme distance from the Eibishter, through their tshuva, it becomes revealed within the Yidden that their true will, their true desire the entire time, even during the time while they were sinning, is in a likus. Who should talk for them, it's just that their Yetzer Hara coerced them, it forced them, it gave them no choice, and made them sin against their own will, against what they truly want. Why is it that a Yid, Rahman al-Islam, strayed so far from Yiddishkeit, lived his life without a care for Kedusha, without a care for the Eibishter, finds himself to one level or another, everybody with their own level, finds himself with a feeling of regret and a feeling of wanting to reconnect and come closer to the Eibishter. I thought he made his choice. You made your choice. Go live with your choice. You're happy with it. You're enjoying it. It's good. And we find that the Yid can't do that. Even while he's busy enjoying himself, he's feeling that he wants to reconnect to the Eibishter. Why is that? Because it's obvious that the connection of the Yid, or this itself, the fact that this is the way it works, shows that the connection to the Yid is beyond anything that he does. It's a connection that defines his very self. And just like you can't change one thing to another thing, it's impossible to change it. So too the Yid, no matter what he does in circumstance, when it comes to the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs, which relative to the essence of a Yid is the things that he does, is not his essence, even, no matter what he does there, he's always connected to the Eibishter.
At the end of the day is here, there. The end of the day is that you're connected.
It's a very difficult question. I mean it. It's not. It's way beyond the scope of what I'm able to explain without reading again the several sichos mamam that discuss it. That is it's not a simple question. Do we actually have bechira or not?
It's much higher than bechira. It's addressing the whole point that you put out before. The chelik al kami mamash.
Yeah. I think ultimately the explanation for that one is that we have to take it on trust that the Eibishter does give us choice. We have to take it on trust. We have to believe what it says in Torah that we do have a choice. Kipir Tzemach Tzedek, like the Tzemach Tzedek explains this situation of a Yid who's Rahman Litzlan stuck in sin. On the pasuk, he found her in the field. The girl cried out. There was somebody who was oppressing, who was hurting the girl in the field, and she was calling out, and there was nobody who could help her. In other words, she was coerced, she was forced, but it's not what she wanted. The way that Tzemach Tzedek explains this pasuk is Shegam we said the sada, that there's a sada de l'umazeh, the sada of klippus. Even when the night of the girl, who's the girl is the neshama, finds itself in the sada of l'umazeh and klippus. V'yeseda mizu, and it descended so low, it spent so much time in this field, so much time sunk in l'umazeh, that it reached the situation she'gzegaram she'esav ish sada hechzik ba v'shachavima. It got itself into so much trouble until even Esav, the klippus, the ish sada, held her and violated her, and the neshama is now completely ruined. Chas v'sholom to say that it's not completely ruined; it's only what it seems to be. Negam oz, even at that very moment, haratzin da neshama hu b'kedusha. The neshama still wants kedusha at the moment when it's completely violated by klippus. The Yetzer Hara took complete hold of the person, and the person fell. Chas v'sholom, who knows how far. In that moment itself, not afterwards, in that moment itself, its ratzon, its will is in kedusha. That's the continuation of the pasuk tzaka hanaira. The neshama cries out with a bitter soul. It bothers her to her essence. This that the klippus took a hold of her tzaka hanaira. So therefore, it calls out. Valideze ayin meishiela, not ein meishiela. Read it differently. Ayin meishiela shenimshach leYeshua mibchinas ayin shelamayla mihishtalshelos. That it's salvation from this situation and it's returning to its pure place next to the Eibishter comes to it from a place that's higher than ishtalshelos. In other words, from Yud Gimel Midas Rachmim. And what brings this about? And why is this? This is all because, like we said before, that the Yid is connected to the Eibishter in his essence. That is what he is. It's not a circumstance. If it was a circumstance, then at a certain point, it would be lost. It would be broken. It would be taken away. And now, Chas v'sholom, the Yid would become a Goy. That's it. It would be the end of the story. He was a Yid once because he was born a Yid, because he was taught Torah mitzvahs, because he did Torah mitzvahs. Then he stopped, and a lot of time passed, and things got worse and worse and worse and worse, and he ended up becoming a Goy. Rahman al-Islam. That's what we're... But that's all if you say that Torah and mitzvahs and the Eibishter is not one thing with the Yid. If this is the definition of the Yid, then no matter what, it's always the Yid. And why is that the definition of the Yid? Because he's connected to Atzmos. Because he's connected to the essence of the Eibishter. Since the revelation of this inner desire of every single Yid, which has its source, why does it come? Why does it exist, this will of a Yid to be connected to the Eibishter that's in his essence? Because the Yid is rooted in the essence of the Eibishter. When do we see this quality of a Yid? We don't see this quality of a Yid by a Chassidish Yid. We don't see this quality of a Yid by a Yid who sits and learns Torah his whole life and never sins. We only see this quality of a Yid, dafke, by a Yid who sinned and became so distant, and still nothing had the power to break his connection to the Eibishter. Aha! Now we see his connection to the essence of the Eibishter. Lachein, therefore, therefore, when did the Yid Gimel Midas Harachmim truly reveal the essence of a Yid? Dafka a Yid who was the greatest sinner. And since that's when the primary revelation of the essence of a Yid happens by the sinner, therefore the Yid Gimel Midas Harachmim are also primarily granted and elevated a dimension, an aspect of Atzmos, Dafka when they deal and help with these sinners, the worst of the sinners. So again, the whole story is all upside down. We're not talking about over here big, holy, lofty things coming to help a very distant and small Jew. We're talking about the Jew who's connected to the essence of the Eibishter, transforming the entire existence, even transforming the existence that's higher than Hishtalshalus, connecting it to Atzmos. And this now explains to us why the entire phrase of Ani Ledodi V'Deidi Li is all included in Rashi Tevis of Elul. The Rebbe over here explains Rashi Tevis Elul. The last two letters of the word Elul V'Deidi Li are pertain primarily to the revelation of the Yid Gimel Midas Harachmim, even though in the beginning of the mamer we said in the name of the Alter Rebbe that V'Deidi Li is the time of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Nevertheless, it's still part of the word Elul, and the reason why it's still part of the word Elul is because the words V'Deidi Li are talking about the revelation of the 13 attributes of mercy that occur in the month of Elul. And this that we find V'Deidi Li, the Gimel Midas Harachmim, the 13 attributes of mercy come after the Yid. They come after Ani Ledodi. Seemingly it goes counter to the timeline of the story. The timeline of the story is first Deidi Li, there was the Yid Gimel, the revelation of Yid Gimel Midas Harachmim, and that awakened me, therefore Ani Ledodi. So Rebbe says, no, the words in the Rashi Tevis aren't according to the timeline. The words in the Rashi Tevis are according to what's higher and what's actually the cause, what actually drives the other. If we looked at it on what happens first in the order of time, Ataka Elul shouldn't have been Elul, it should have been Deidi Li V'Ani Loi. But since the Rashi Tevis is referencing what's higher, what's powering the other things, so over here the Yid comes first. The Yid is powering the Yid Gimel Midas Harachmim. Ani Ledodi is actually higher than Deidi Li. The work of a Yid, of a physical Yid in this physical world like us, is higher than the great revelation of Deidi Li that comes from above from Yid Gimel Midas Harachmim, who cannot, like that explained earlier, the intention why the Eibishter created the Yid Gimel Midas Harachmim. And the intention why, and also the intention why the Eibishter revealed the Yid Gimel Midas Harachmim in Elul, is in order to awaken the person to return and chof, to tshuva. And by awakening the person, the Yid Gimel Midas Harachmim are elevated. So it's Ani Ledodi, it's appropriately Ani Ledodi, because Ani Ledodi, the Yid's Aveda, is higher than the Gili of the Yid Gimel Midas Harachmim. There are two parts of this. The elevation that occurs in the Yid Gimel Midas Harachmim by it coming down into this world in order to awaken the person. That's the first one. We discussed that already at length. And then the second part is and then you have the elevation that happens in the Yid Gimel Midas Harachmim when the Yid actually does his tshuva. And the tshuva of Yid, there's two levels, two parts. The elevation that happens in the Yid Gimel Midas Harachmim that comes from the pleasure that the Eibishter has in the service of a Yid, which in Torah and mitzvahs, and especially in the service of tshuva, which is even higher than the service of Torah and mitzvahs. Which this is the part that the Alter Rebbe mentions, Mekabel b'sefer panim yafis, like we discussed earlier in the mamer, And from that, the Yid reaches the next level, and also the Yid Gimel Midas Harachmim get to the next level. The revelation, the essential pleasure and love and connection that the Eibishter has to a Yid becomes revealed, which this connection is the Yid himself, not because of his tshuva, not because of anything he does or doesn't do. It's because of who he is. It's because he's a Yid, and that's why the Eibishter loves him. The Sheish and the Neshamas who l'mayla me'sheish the Torah mitzvahs, the Sheish and the Neshamas are even higher than the Sheish of Torah mitzvahs, gam mitzvahs tshuva, even higher than the mitzvah of tshuva, which, like we mentioned before, tshuva is higher than all the other mitzvahs, and that's why it can repair all of the other mitzvahs. And this is the second level that the Alter Rebbe mentions. It shows them a smiling face. The Shleimer says the Rebbe, since the awakening to tshuva that the person has, which the awakening of tshuva is what brings about the revelation of panim yafis and panim seichkes that we just discussed. What kickstarts this whole process? What gets it in motion? Is Hagilid Yidgimel Midas Harachmim, is the revelation, is the V'dei Li, the revelation of the Yidgimel Midas Harachmim. L'chein ha'pu'ula da'ani l'deidi b'v'dei Li, the main impact of ani l'deidi, of the Yid's Aveda, and V'dei Li and the Yidgimel Midas Harachmim, who shagam Hagilid V'dei Li mis'ala l'hatanim b'panim yafis u'panim seichkes. It also brings up, elevates the Yidgimel Midas Harachmim to the level of pleasure of panim yafis and panim seichkes. In other words, it connects it to the Eibishter, to his essence, as we discussed earlier. V'yiratzin says the Rebbe, may it be the Eibishter's will, that by the work of a Yid and down here in this world, which is what we were discussing the whole time of the mamer, the Aved of a Yid, and especially through the Aved in the month of Elul, we will merit quickly the revelation of the Geula Hasidah, which then is also going to be another thing is going to be turned on instead. We're going to have another upside down situation. At the time when Mashiach will come, will be the true and ultimate idea and concept of the Eibishter showing a smiling face. It will be a time of happiness and joy in the world. And it's explained in several places that there will be a fight. The Eibishter will make a fight between the Levyasan and the Shei Habar, it says in Medrash. And the Yidden will watch this fight, which is explained in Chassidus, that the entire war of good and bad that we're stuck in this world, that we have to deal with our Yetzer Hara and with the physicality and the materiality of this world, is not because it's distant from the Eibishter. It's not because it's bad. It's not chas v'sholom because we're bad. No, the opposite is true. It's an upside down situation the way we perceive it. The truth is, the whole thing is only because this is what will bring the greatest joy and the greatest pleasure to the Eibishter. And when Mashiach will come, our joy will be full, will be complete. The kol zeh b'karev mamash, and all of this will be immediately now. Shkeach. It's worth it to mention that the Rebbe says that Az Yumali Schoik Pinu, that it says that Asur la'adam sheyumali piv schoik b'elam hazeh. A person is not allowed to have complete joy in this world in the time of Galus, because the Eibishter's Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, and so we're not allowed to. Only when Mashiach will come, that's when we're allowed to have complete joy, and it has implications in halacha also, different restrictions on music and other things. So it says Az Yumali, when Mashiach will come, that's when we could be happy. The Rebbe says that because in our generation we already have the revelation of Mashiach in this world. So the Rebbe said in Tafshin Nun Aleph, if you want to know what happened in Tafshin Nun Aleph, there was the revelation of Mashiach in this world. And the Rebbe said, because Mashiach is now revealed in this world, so we could already be happy now. We could already be joyous now. We don't have to wait for actually Mashiach to come. We could already have Oz already now, Yomali Schek Pinu. And that's how our Aveda and El should go, with the joy of Oz Yomali Schek Pinu.
Amen. Amen.